Hi everyone, so I'm just going to walk you through my new Max for Live device called Superposition, and it's quite an in-depth device, so please bear with me through this walkthrough. I'll start the walkthrough by kind of going over the main concept of the device, and then afterwards I'll talk about what each parameter does in the whole device. Okay, so what is Superposition? It's a sample-based playback device. It's pretty open-ended how to use it. It's good for mangling, or it's all about making different states of playback and kind of a probabilistic system of transitioning between those states of playback. And by state of playback, I mean like basically a whole preset setting of playback and effects and modulation settings. Okay, so right now in the device there's just one state, and you can see right here in the top left corner number of states 1. And if I create more, you see there's these more dots and colors. I'll go back down to just 1. And so let's make our first playback state. So our first just loop or whatever, because it's kind of open-ended how to use this. So we'll drop in a sample, this one. It's just like a guitar. And I'll drop it in. You have 6 sample slots, so this device works to up to 6 samples, and it's monophonic, I should point out. And all right, I'll drop it in this first slot. Okay, and it just starts looping. And there's a lot of different ways to play this back and stuff like that, so I'll get into that later, but let's stay focused on just understanding the core of this device. So here's a state of playback. It's just looping this quarter note loop, and I can change maybe that's the loop it does for state 1, and maybe state 1 is actually 3 steps down and is backwards. I don't know, just random right now. Okay, so let's say this is one playback state, and then I'll add another and open it. And when you add a new playback state, it just copies over the last one. So now these two are identical and they sound the same. Okay, so this purple state, let's change it. Let's make it 8 note loop and play it forward here. Okay, so the blue state sounds like this, and the purple. Okay, so as you can see, these are basically just like presets. These 2 little states. States are kind of like just like presets. And not only can they just be the playback, but there's an effects menu here, and so this purple one could actually be distorted. Okay. Alright, so the kind of idea of this device is you make these different states of playback and effects and modulation settings too, and you transition between them. And the way you can, and then the other aspect of this device is kind of how you transition between these states. And there's a few ways to do it in this device. One way to do it is just with MIDI notes. So I could just literally play MIDI notes and trigger these different states. So I could play basically the notes these states are assigned to trigger them. So this blue one's assigned to C3, and this purple one is assigned to C#3. So let me turn on my keyboard, and so I can just, right now I'm just playing MIDI notes and changing between them. The other way to change between them, and sorry it sounds so horrible, just a demo, is this kind of, maybe you've seen it in other devices of mine, this Markov, sorry, samples are dropping, this Markov probabilistic system. And we're gonna maybe need some more states to see that, or maybe I can even drag in a preset. Oh no, let's just make another state. So now we have 3 states, and let's make this one not distorted. And let's make this one even faster. And here. And yeah, sure, that's fine for now. So we have 3 states. This one. Yeah, let's make this is a different note. Okay, and then so the way you can change between them, like I said, is with MIDI notes. You also have a button here that switches the next state. But what determines what is the next state? And like I said, it's using this probabilistic system. So I'm going to be jumping around a little, so just bear with me. Alright, so we've been in this playback menu this whole time, and that just deals with the playback. Now, there's an effects menu, a modulation one, and here, the last one is a transition menu. This might be a little confusing at first, so just bear with me. So the transition menu deals with when you press next or go to the next state. This transition tells you which state to go to from the state that you're on. So right now we're on the blue state. The blue state is playing back, and you can tell because in this picture the blue state has the white circle around it. If I double click this, now this purple one's playing back and it has the white circle around it. So I'll go back to the blue one. The blue one's currently playing back, and if we want to trigger the next state by pressing the next button or through another method, what will happen? Well, here is the transition probabilities, these sliders. And right now there's only 3 because there's only 3 states. So we're in the blue settings. So right now when you press next, these say what's the probability of the blue state going to the next state. So if I turn the purple one all the way up, then when we press next, there's a 100% chance the blue will go to the purple. And if I turn this one up, if we press next, there's a 100% chance the blue will go to the pinkish whatever color. And if I click the pink one, now we see the pink settings, and it has a 100% chance of going to purple. And if I click purple, it has a 100% chance of going to blue. And that's why these little lines are just pointing like this. They all just have one place they can go, and it's to the next one. So if I press next, it just goes exactly where these little lines are pointing. But let's say the blue one, I say do this. It has 50% chance of going purple, 50% chance of going pink. Now pay attention to when we transition from blue. Sometimes it'll go to purple, sometimes it'll go to pink. Went to purple a lot that time, but hopefully you can see. And if I go to purple and do 50-50 blue, pink, the same thing will happen for purple. Okay, so hopefully that drove in the idea. There's another way to transition between states in this device, and they're through this Markov probability system, which you can change the transition probabilities here in this transition menu for. So let's recap so far. In this device, you can make playback modes that use up to 6 different samples. So that's a good point. I could say drop this sample here of the kalimba and instead have this purple one play the kalimba sample. And now the pink one plays the kalimba and the purple and blue play the guitar. Anyway, so recapping, you can create different playback states on up to 6 samples with different effects and modulations, and you can change between them with MIDI notes or with this probability Markov system. And you trigger the next transition in the probability system with either this button, or below it there's a couple different auto transition modes so that they'll just automatically transition for you, which I'll get into in, sorry, my audio writing's creating some sample dropouts. Anyway, which I'll get into in a moment. But hopefully as I describe this device more, you can see exactly what you can do with it, which is a lot of stuff. Because on face value, you can rig something like this almost up in, say, a drum rack or something like this, where you have a multitude of different sample playbacks that are triggerable with MIDI notes. But hopefully you'll see by the end of this, there's a lot of different ways you can work with this that you can't do with a drum rack and similar. And on top of that, this has a certain kind of workflow to it that works with I don't know, whatever kind of results it makes, these weird kind of glitchy or choppy or otherwise kind of effects you can get with this. All right, so now I'll kind of go through the device and kind of explain all the features it has, which is a lot. So hang in there. I mean, just to point out right away some cool stuff. It has different playback modes, has like granular and spectral playback, so you can do time stretching. All these kind of things, like the speed of that playback and all these things, they're all modulatable. These little circles here are ways to modulate these parameters in a number of ways. So there's a lot of just like cool ways to even play back this, but I'll get into all that in a moment. So I'll start over here at the far left, and we're just going to go through all the settings of the device so you know all the features and how it works. Okay, so we already kind of started here. This little parameter tells you the number of states that the device works with, which is up to 16. This button here, like we hopefully notice, triggers the next state, and the next state in the probabilistic transition system. So next is just when you're at this state and you're gonna go next, you see what's the chance of me going to this state or this state. And when you have more states, there's more possible destinations. Okay, and so just below this button it says auto. So these are different auto modes for triggering the next state. So there's two different auto modes. One is state and one is fixed. I'm going to start with fixed because it's simple. In fixed auto mode, you just set a fixed time interval that it transitions to the next state. So right now it's set at 1 bar. You can go to a half bar. And now, so now every half bar, the next state is automatically transitioned to. My silly example. And you can have that not synced too and set it in milliseconds if you want. Okay, so fixed is simple. State is a little more complicated. The state auto transition mode means that the kind of interval or way that one state transitions to another state is actually set in the state itself. And that's over here in this bottom right corner that says transition. Each state has its own transition settings. So right now they're all set at quarter notes, but I could have this blue state be instead 1 bar. And this pink state could instead be 1/8 note. So now let's listen to the automatic transitions. So hopefully you can tell they're transitioning at different rates because I set each state a different rate. And I'll get a little more into this later. There's a couple more options in that, but let's stick over here for now. And so those are the two auto modes, and you can actually have them both on at the same time and create kind of like different kind of rhythms together. Okay, let's have them off. Okay, so right here next to this is some MIDI settings, this little section. So by default, MIDI always triggers different states to playback, or loads them, I should say. So I'm just playing some MIDI notes right now. Now there's this gate. If I turn gate on, now no playback or transitioning will happen unless I press a MIDI note. So I'm just pressing MIDI notes. And so this MIDI gate allows you to play it a little more like a normal instrument or whatever, to where when it doesn't make sound unless you press a MIDI note. So if you don't want this thing to continuously run, then you're going to turn on this MIDI gate. And if you want it to just run even with the probability system, but to stop, then you just draw like a 1-note MIDI clip to get it to play, just like you would any kind of MIDI instrument. So I don't have it on by default, so that you see it's kind of just like a looping ongoing device, but I would say a lot of times maybe you'd want MIDI gate on by default when working with this device, so it doesn't make sound unless you want it to. Okay, below that is this. So remember I said different MIDI notes are assigned different states, and the first state is this one, this blue one. And so the start just means that the first state is assigned to this MIDI note, and from there it goes up. So right here, down here, this little thing shows which one the current state's assigned to. So if I press purple, it says C#3, and this one D3. And that's because there are just ascending one step after another from this start note. And if I change this, you'll see it changed what the blue one was assigned to, and now the purple, and now the pink. Yeah, so that's if you just want to change where they start playing from. And below this is this glide, and so I bet usually you'll probably have this off unless you want some weird stuff. Well, actually, there's a lot of different ways you can work with this. So, and glide says, okay, so when I play a state, it instantly loads the other state. But if I have glide on, it'll kind of glide some of the parameters. So it has like a 500 millisecond glide, so it took like a second for them to get there. If I change this one to a different pitch, say, now I'll glide the pitches. Over this glide time. Anyway, I turned the glide off now. Okay, so now this section we got. Now the center section. There's a few things here. This is like the main display, I guess. Okay, one thing is this button. This works kind of like the drum rack follow. So when this is on, every time a new state is triggered, the settings are automatically loaded for that state to edit. So you can see when I'm playing the notes now, it automatically loads the state to edit. If I turn this off, now it won't load the states when they're played back, so that you don't get pulled away if you're just editing one state. So yeah, that's what this is for. This bottom left corner, I already said, is the assigned note of the currently selected state for editing. There's a little info thing here that tells you what I'll describe to you now. Oh, that thing needs to be over. This button changes the color scheme randomly, so you just click it till you like it. Okay, so to mess with this, if you single click a state, it loads it for editing. If you double click a state, it triggers it for playback. If you drag one state to another, it will copy its parameters to that state. Okay, and now the top left corner. So this is going to be hard to show with such a small example, but this, if you have the marbles module, it kind of works like the locking mechanism in that. So if I were triggering these for playback automatically, and then if I press lock, it will lock the last X amount of state transitions. So if I go down to 1, it will just stay at 1 state. And if I go to 2, it just goes between the last 2 states that were transitioned, and 3 and 4 and so on. And so if you have a lot of states or a lot of crazy transitions and you press lock, this will lock it to a more like stable rhythm or repeatable rhythm or something. So this can be cool, especially for quote unquote musical ideas or whatever. Okay. Anyway, that's this whole section. Okay, so now the pink one, now that I changed the color scheme, is the first state. Okay, so now we get back into all these settings. Hopefully this goes a little quicker than the first part of the video. All right, so let me stop automatic transitioning and just play this state. Okay, so here we'll go over the playback parameters. So here you can select between which samples played. So there's 2 samples. Okay, below that, here you choose where the loop starts playing from, which you can set in percentage of the sample, like 50% is halfway. Or you can also, if you press Q, you can set it in quantized bars and quarter note beats. So if I press 1 here, this is 1 quarter note in, 2 quarter notes in, 3 quarter notes in, 1 bar and 3 quarter notes in, 1 bar and 3.5 quarter notes in, 3 and quarter note and 1/8. I don't know. Okay, so you can set it in a quantized way, and this is useful like if you made an auto jungle, which I have, like jungle music or things like this, and you want to go between quarter note steps of a sample in each state. This is pretty useful, and you can warp the sample so it maintains its rhythm if you know the BPM. Okay, so that's the start. All right, this NS, this is a little complicated, but all right, when you press, so usually a state has a sample it plays back and a start, like we're setting, like this one has this sample it plays starting here, this one has this sample it plays starting here, this one has this sample it plays starting here. But if you press NS, then actually this state no longer has a set start or sample, and instead it starts playing back on the last sample it was playing where the last play had left off. So if I load this state now and then this state, it starts playing back where at the same sample as the last state where it was playing off. And if I go here instead to this sample, this state, and then go here, as you see now, the pink state's playing back from the other sample where the orange left off. So NS removes the states set, start, and sample, and then instead this state becomes like an open-ended state, like maybe it's a repeat effect or maybe other effects or things like this. So this state becomes like almost an effect or something to apply to the last state that was playing back, if you have NS on, or you can use it in different ways, I guess. Anyway, the next parameter is the length. So that's just the length of the loop, which you can have in synced time or in free milliseconds. Okay. Next to this is the pitch transmission. And the F switches to the fine tuning. It just toggles between those menus. It doesn't change the functionality. Okay, then here is the loop fade window. So if I turn it up, sorry, I think there's just a bug. Yeah, there must be a bug with the NS thing. Sorry, I'll fix that. Okay. So anyway, sorry, back to the fade window. So the fade window, sorry. Okay, so if I turn the fade window off, there's no window. If I turn it up, there's like a triangle window. If I change the center, it's a saw down. In the center here, it's a saw up. So you can add, this is on by default just to prevent some clicks, but you can have it off, especially if you like clicks. Or if you want to shape the sound. So there's different uses of the fade window. Okay. So sorry about that bug. Threw me off for a second. Okay, so here, right now below this is the amount of repeats the loop does. Right now it's set to infinite. If I set it to 1, it only repeats 1 time. So when this state's triggered, only repeats 1 time. Or with 2, or 3. So there's lots of ways to play this device back and transition and all. So sometimes you might want a state just to repeat a couple times and then have some silence, or just once and use it like a single one-shot thing. I don't know, there's different ways to use it, so you have this option. Okay, so speed is not on because we're in normal playback mode. So let's go to a grain playback mode. And so right now it's playing back with grains. And let's make this longer. And you can change the grain size here. And you can change the grain spray here. Which there's usually a little on, because if you have none on, you get kind of a tone, which could be cool. But then you usually spray it. Let's make it longer. And then, now that we're in a non-normal playback mode, we can change the speed. Yeah, so with grain playback, you can slow it down without affecting pitch and do pitch separate. And there's also a spectral playback mode, this one, which you can also slow down. You can even freeze it. So this could be useful for many different things you can do with them. Cool, so I'll go back to the normal one. Okay, and then there's the play direction here. And back, forth, and back, forth, forward, back. Yeah, okay, and then a couple other things. The transition that I touched on, so in the state transition, this sets the transition for each state if in this auto mode, and you can just set the length for the state. It can be in milliseconds too. It can also be in repeats, so you can just have it repeat 3 times before it transitions. So there's different ways to do this. It's just pretty open-ended. Okay, and then above this doesn't deal with the state settings. These 2 things are actually for the sample. So if you change this, it will change it for all the states, this BPM warp thing. So this BPM warp thing is to make it so that if you change the BPM or something like that, that this device will still play the sample back at the same rhythm as the warp. So you can either try to make it so, like if I did this amen break, it's at 138 BPM. So if I warp it there and set things to sync, then if I change the BPM of the live set, which I'm doing now, it will change the speed or pitch of the playback depending what play mode you're in, so that it maintains this BPM, so it warps it. It scales the speed or pitch depending on the play mode. If you're on this mode, it's the speed. If you're on this mode, it's the pitch. So if you know the BPM of the sample, you can warp it and maintain the same rhythm no matter what. And it's very useful for a lot of stuff. Or you can just do weird things with it, like just scale the BPM. But then the rhythm won't be on, of course. Okay, Okay, all right, we're done this section finally. All right, effects should go quick. So you have different effects, low pass, different filters, resonance, distortion, bit crushing, wave folding, gain, panning, very simple phaser, a delay, and a reverb. Okay, that went fast. We're done. All right, now the modulation section. So let's talk about the modulations. So in the modulation section, here are the different modulation sources. To apply them, okay, so every parameter that has this little circle with a sine wave in it, you can modulate it. So let's go to the pitch because we can hear that easy. If I press this circle, this little menu pops out. If I toggle it, it hides and shows it. So it says pitch. We're clicking the pitch. Here's the modulation sources, so I can do the LFO. Or I can do a sequencer. Now this one at the top, offset. Okay, so all this modulation stuff is per state. Like if I do this LFO here on pitch, if I go to this state, there's no LFO on pitch. It's only on this state. But this offset up here will change it for all the states. And not only that, none of these parameters you can map to MIDI. I mean, these ones you can, and these ones you can. But none of the state ones you can map because there's different states to MIDI. But you can map these offsets. So if you want to modulate the pitch of the device, or the length, or the start, or something from an external device, or automate it, you're going to use this offset to automate things and to modulate them. So just if you want to modulate a parameter of all the states externally or map it to a macro, you got to open these modulation menus and bang, it's this offset right here, show automation, etc. Okay, and otherwise below the offset you have the modulation sources. So let's give the pitch some sequencer. Oh, so the sources are envelope, sequencer, LFO, a random spray value which you get at the beginning of triggering a state. So that's a pretty good one. And the velocity of the last MIDI note received. Okay, so let's sequence it, I guess, and let's go in the modulation. So here's the sequencer in the middle. You can change this step values, the rate. You can change the number of steps. Pretty simple. LFO, also pretty basic. It has a re-trigger option. If re-trigger's on, it means the LFO is re-triggered, reset every time the state is triggered. And here's the envelope that's triggered every time the state's triggered. Maybe I'll map the pitch to the envelope. Okay, let me trigger it. So as 2 seconds up, 2 seconds down, sustain 0. Let's change that. So sustains higher, and we can make it repeat more than one time if we want. 3 times. Okay, and yeah. And then the last menu we kind of went over is the transition probabilities. So again, these are the chance this state has of transitioning to these states. You can also give it just a percentage of chance of just keep transitioning back to itself. You can store different presets of these transitions up here. So actually you can make different rhythms that you can switch between, and this thing you can automate, so you can actually automate these different kind of rhythms that you create. Here you can randomize just the current selected states probabilities, or you can press randomize all and randomize all of them, and clear all just sets them to 100% back to themselves. And then down here, kind of hiding, is this default, and that's just like, it kind of bypasses this whole system. So if default was 1, which is the pink one, if I went to 2, it's red, like the red one. If I was at red and I turned bias to 100%, now every time we press next or transition, it's gonna go to the red one, no matter what these say, 100% of the time. But if I turn this down to 0, this doesn't matter, and it just follows the probabilities. And if I turn it to 30%, that means every time next is pressed, there's a 30% chance it will just go to this one, and the other 70% of the time it will follow the transition probabilities. Kind of dumb, sorry. Let me just turn that down. Okay. Yeah. All right, there's just a couple other quick things. So one is, there's this default button. If you press that, it'll, on the current state you're select on, it'll just default everything, including the modulation mappings, back to the original default values. And if you press randomize, it randomizes the window that you're currently in. So if I open effects and press randomize, it randomizes just the effects, which are usually pretty crazy. And if I go to playback and press randomize, it won't randomize the effects, it only randomizes the playback. Yeah. Let me go back to default. And the last thing is just, let me hide this menu. Last thing is just these main things, which is easy. Master gain, master pan. This thing, okay, it's more confusing. So if you forced a state transition before the playback's done, like if it's in the middle of playback, to avoid clicks, there's a quick little fade in and out, which is accounted for in the timing, don't worry. And so you can change the timing of that fade in and out to avoid clicks here. Usually you just keep it here. If you want to have clicks or something, you can turn it off or want something sharper, so go to 0. I think usually you probably won't touch this, but you can feel it out. And lastly is number of grains. So if we're on grain playback mode and slowed it and made it really long, so we can see the grains. This just sets the number of grains that it uses. So we can go 3 to 8 grains. Great. So I believe that's the whole device. I know it was a lot. Thanks for sticking with me. Oh, and this button enables all the effects or not, so you can bypass them. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just reach out to me. This device is really open-ended. Check out the teaser video. Reach out to me if you want to know more about it. You can, like I said, you can make jungle with this. Let me just show you that real quick. It's not a great preset, it's a simple one, but you can see here, sorry, the sample's dropping. You can see here in this preset, sorry, let me turn this. You can see here in this preset, it's kind of going between states in quarter notes, and every once in a while jumping to other states that have little effects or cut a different part of it, which you can spray and modulate. There's a lot of things you can do. I think there's even one that slows down. Where is it? There it is. Anyway, so I just wanted to show you that. And yeah, I mean, you can obviously not use the probability system if you don't want, and just literally draw the MIDI notes to transition it if you want it specific. But the probability system, maybe you want some random cunning jump up thing, and you can use them all at the same time. You can trigger with MIDI notes and have it continue to trigger with the probabilities to do lots of stuff. Like you can trigger one little group of states that kind of quickly go between each other for little glitchy things. All right. Anyway, it's a long video. Thanks for sticking with me. Enjoy.